because the sector in focus is telecom, and look at what these stocks are doing in the pre-open market right now. Both Indus Tower and Vodafone Idea, last I checked, they were up almost 9% apiece. Yeah, 10% on Vodafone Idea. Indus Tower has now cooled off a little bit. It's a more measured 4-5% move. But why the excitement? In case you've missed the news overnight, Vodafone PLC is going to be selling 3% of its stake in Indus Towers, and the street believes that, a nice chunk of this money eventually will make its way in Voda Idea, and then Voda Idea could be using some of this money to repay its dues to Indus Towers. So that's how, both the stocks are quite excited.
Surabhi has sold. The block has happened already.
Oh, okay. Yeah, while I took my coffee break, I think. All right, so the money is basically going to start trickling in. Now, where does it leave things with respect to Voda Idea? I mean, this is a small trickle, perhaps, of fund infusion that's happening. Let's ask Gaurav Malhotra. He, of course, tracks the telecom space. He's executive director at Axis Capital. Gaurav, great to have you on the show. So the block has happened, as Prashant was pointing out. What do you make of the development? And let's talk about your rough estimates in terms of the money flowing back to Voda Idea and maybe in turn to Indus.
See, the thing is, Indus is selling around 2,800 crores Vodafone is selling 2,800 crores in Indus, out of which 2,000 crores is coming to Vodafone Idea. Right now, this is actually part of the security package which was agreed to during the Infratel Indus merger. That there will be some second lien on some stake of which Vodafone owns in Indus for the purpose of repayment. Now, from our perspective, see, Vodafone has been repaying its outstanding dues back to Indus over the past few quarters. So the peak was around 5,800 crores, which end of second quarter was around 3,500 crores. So 2,300 crores has already been repaid. And in the last quarter, actually 1,100 crores was repaid. So our base case was that, Vodafone will use its internal accruals to repay the remaining 3,500 crores over the next 3-4 quarters. Now, with this 2,000 crores, maybe this gets accelerated by 1 to 2 quarters. So nothing really changes from our perspective, whether it is for Indus or for Vodafone from that perspective.
Okay, but I guess it gives the comfort that the money may be just coming a little earlier than you earlier expected. In that sense. And I get it. I mean, for Vodafone Idea, this is, I think, a very small part of their overall, situation that they have to look at. Do you have coverage on Indus? For Indus, things seem to be a lot more clearer. What's your view on Indus overall, beyond this development?
See, the thing is, the way we think about Indus, obviously, things have improved majorly from the past 2-3 years. But in some shape or form for Indus, a large part of Indus's incremental revenues being built in by us and by consensus over the next 3 years is premised on Vodafone expanding its network the way they have guided to. And that network expansion is premised on the equity plus debt fundraise. Now, equity fundraise has happened, but the debt fundraise, there has been certain challenges. So to put things in perspective, 40% of the incremental revenues of Indus over the next, say, 3-4 years come from Voda. Now, if there is some challenge or issue with that debt raise, whether in terms of quantum or timing, then obviously that creates an uncertainty. So from that perspective, we are not sort of positive. We have an ad rating on Indus. We feel that, we require clarity on the debt raise in Voda Idea for us to get more constructive. Stock obviously has also run up quite well over the past say 12 to 18 months.
Okay, that's really interesting. You're saying 40% of Indus's incremental revenues are dependent on Voda, not so much on Airtel or the other telecom players, which obviously need the tower infrastructure as well. So that's interesting. That's on Indus.
Bharti has already done majorly of the 5G rollout. So Bharti will continue to roll out. But going forward, with that 50,000 crores, 50,000 crores, that obviously part of that will be spent on the network, which will come on Indus Towers.
Okay. So Indus's fortunes, I mean, incrementally, if you're talking about fresh triggers, are in that sense very closely linked to Vodafone Idea. That's important to keep in mind. On Vodafone Idea itself, the next watch point or the next trigger, anyone's guess, right? They're getting this reprieve on the bank guarantees at least. So that's a good news that sort of came through. What else would you recommend on Voda Idea? And also just leave us with perhaps a quick view on Bharti as well, if you see any major upsides ahead, maybe more tariff hikes ahead.
See, in terms of Voda, the next trigger obviously is, in the management in the earnings call had mentioned that banks are looking for certain clarity on the AGR dues, before which there's some conclusion happens on the debt raise. So I think so the next trigger for Voda Idea is obviously the debt raise. I think so that is what everyone seems to be waiting for, including us. In terms of Bharti, see, Bharti continue to remain positive. It continues to execute well. In terms of tariff hikes, we feel that going forward, the frequency of tariff hikes could actually accelerate. The last two hikes have had a 3 to 2.5 year gap between them. But given that the transmission of tariff into the ARPU and revenue for operators has moved up quite sharply, for Bharti it was almost 80% in the last hike. So going forward, you don't need to take very large hikes to see a decent uptake in ARPU. So maybe that 2.5 year gap can sort of reduce to 1.5 or 2 years in the next hike, because you don't need to take a very large hike. So that's the way we are sort of thinking about the frequency of tariff hikes. But on the whole, we are generally positive on Bharti.
No, absolutely. And by the way, are you inclined to believe that they will get, because AGR, Gaurav, is the big one, right? And are you inclined to give them the benefit of doubt that something will be worked out?
See, we feel that eventually there will be some sort of equity conversion for some part of the dues. I think so. That's the base case which we are sort of working.
Okay. Okay. So not a clean kind of reversal of what was said earlier, right? That is not the base case.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I got it. Gaurav, I mean, in terms of telecom equipment players, do you have coverage at all?
No, we don't.
On names like Tejas Network, etc.? No. Okay. All right. We'll leave it there then. Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate you being here on the channel this morning. Thanks very much for taking those questions. I think